This is why I don't think we are ready to move to Mars just yet. In that, one, we can't even send a satellite to another planet. Satellite, like a Voyager, you know what I mean? And they can't be returned back. So, a couple of, I don't remember how many years ago, like Bill Nye and someone else, I can't remember his name. They had a contest to to offer meeting them in place for suggesting like all these science experiments or something. I forget what it was now, but you could meet them if you input a science experiment they thought was worthy of being pursued or something. And that was mine. I wanted a Voyager that could be sent to Jupiter, and then could go, say, from Jupiter and then travel to Venus and then come back to Earth, and it would have an analog camera on it, and so we could like physically take images and have them that have been to space and brought back to Earth. That would be so cool. That's a basic step. To send people to Mars, to colonize Mars, is a huge leap. We need to be able to bring them back. It's very important. So obviously it comes into creating your own fuel, how to generate your own fuel and all that stuff. And like, if I saw a video from Elon talking about if you're missing one thing, like if you're lost out at sea and you don't have vitamin C, it's just a matter of time. So yeah, you're very right. And what if, because right now we're at the brink of World War III, and we have a president trying to implement martial law from what I can gather, and he's trying to pull some slimy shit. And so if we were to just send people to Mars right now, what if we go to war and, all of our resources, we can't bring those people back? Or were we going to just ship them something so maybe they can prolong for 5 years, hoping they can prolong for 5 years? Aside from all of that, ignoring all of that, let's say we can bring them back and we can sustain them on Mars and they're not missing vitamin C. Well, what are the issues with colonizing Mars right now? The issues go into philosophy. So the issues are based on genetics and inherited traits and how different generations are going to evolve and adapt on Mars. And the issue is looking at other countries and how, because it's basically a barren wasteland, it's a desert. And I made another video explaining why socialism is a necessity in certain environments like Canada and Russia and places that don't have diverse, natural, and sustainable resources that they can either trade and diversify. That's how capitalism prospers. But in a place that needs to trade and stuff, and where people, it's basically like your foundation of the civil system is farming, per se. And you don't need warriors on Mars. Well, there's only so many people that can farm to sustain the colony. Well, that's where socialism comes into play, to keep that diversified bloodline. That one person that doesn't fit in, you still need him, because generation and genetics, generational gaps, as I tried to explain why we have evolved to reproduce so young and how that correlates if you have 10 children in a lifetime versus 20 children. And if our life expectancy is 30 years old, well, on Mars, we're going to have to make babies. I mean, obviously, right? We're going to make babies over there. So, would we, eventually, we're going to. So we would, start farming children here and preparing them and educating them to live on Mars and then shipping them over there so that we can maintain our own civil system here. Well, genetically, you still, if there is a collapse on Earth, or there's a collapse on Mars, or there's like a power struggle, We don't really know what's going to happen to people's minds when they're left alone on a planet. And there isn't too many studies done based on one person left alone on an island. All we know is that if you put a prisoner in solitary confinement long enough, it's basically inevitable that you're going to go insane and you're going to disassociate with reality. It's no different than prison. If you let somebody out 30 years later, their mind is affected, and society, it's a culture shock. Same thing with coming back from war, it's a culture shock. So you have to absolutely be able to bring them back from Mars periodically too. That would be healthy, so that we can keep them in touch with our own structure and system, so that they don't become so disassociated with what it means to live on Earth. Because after generations, it's really looking at how we devolve or disassociate from our past ethical structures and moral structures of our grandfathers and their grandfathers, and what is considered reasonable. Well, it only takes that about 2 generations before, and it's usually the grandchildren that'll listen to the grandparents, while the children don't want to live a consistent and repeated and repetitive structure of life. And that would be foundational on Mars, is that you are going to have to repeat the successes of the past for generations until you can get to the point where you can diversify past that and create, more freedoms and liberties and stuff. And it's basically all based around that. It's just how I don't even know if there's any studies for this. This is just me talking, because this is how I look at it, everything, and what I've analyzed. And so if we're going to move to other planets, from food in my teeth, I made the mistake of smelling pepper and I sneezed. Horrendous. Is that, it's kind of all there. I've kind of explained it, but yeah, you're going to completely disassociate those people from our system and our codes. And by the time they come back here, who knows how different they're going to be and how different we're going to be. So when they come back to experience, say they're gone for 10 years, now all of a sudden they're studying back up, are they going to bring that back to Mars, or are they going to bring their own studies and then completely disassociate with Earth and Mars, where the United States disassociated with the United Kingdom, and then all of a sudden we're going to have interplanetary war and stuff like that too. So it's, even if we don't have the wars, trying to maintain a naturally inclined philosophical structure of the mind, for knowledge's sake, I think, therefore I am, I exist, I'm an individual, I choose my future and my path, and I don't have to replicate the life of my predecessor, to a T, because you're going to have to essentially do that on Mars. That's a lot to consider. There's smarter people than I, but I've noticed that the talent and the skill set that it takes to analyze philosophy, maybe I can point out something a little differently. A lot of people are naturally philosophically inclined. Today it took so many generations since, the last shock in culture is love, essentially. Loving thy neighbor. So, and I'm not religious, but it's a great moral stepping stone, is what, Judaism has led into of what we have now in all of the sects, and how they've, diversified morally and learned to live together in a civil structure. But to naturally incline to maintain that on Mars, especially with the environmental shocks and things, it's just that we do, I'm going off my train of thought there, is that we do have a lot of people who are naturally philosophically inclined, but it takes somebody like me who knows how to define it because I can see it in a way. It's a weird thing, you know. When you have eidetic sensory perceptions, you know, smells can feel like colors, and things that you look at can highlight and glow differently. And so I think when it comes to philosophy, you train your mind to be capable of the analysis of simple things that people are inherent with, but they would never think to define or outline or actually explain that this is, even though it's ingrained, if we lose that and you don't know how to define it, you don't even know what you lost. So that's why philosophy is so important.